All right, diving right in. We're tackling India's Gen Z today.
Really going for a deep dive on.
Getting into like what makes this generation tick, why this matters. We're talking something like 2 out of every 5 urban consumers. Aged 15 to 55, that's huge, right?
Huge, yeah, not just some niche group either. This is a cultural and economic force we're talking about.
Absolutely. And it's a generation roughly what, mid 90s to the early 2010s. Those are the rough birth years. Basically folks who grew up with the smartphone like
Yeah,
attached.
digital natives, as they say.
Exactly. But before we go full on digital, let's talk numbers, pure scale. I mean, you read that Mintel article, pretty eye-opening.
No, absolutely. It really hit home. Like 116 million Gen Z consumers just in India. That's massive.
116 million, that's more than a lot of countries' populations.
And that's backed up, by the way, our NASCOM report, too. Larger portion of the population than the global average for Gen Z.
So with that many digital natives, I gotta ask, is it all smartphones all the time, like the stereotype?
You'd think so, right? But it's trickier than that. Say the TCS survey, yes, smartphones are DEE gadget, but get this, desktops still win for internet access.
Whoa, hold on, really? I'd assume the opposite.
Right. Makes you think, is it functionality maybe?
Yeah, like online learning, even gaming, desktops are better for that.
Could be a factor for sure. Throws a wrench in the assumptions.
Speaking of, what about that Gen Z distrust of online info?
Ah, yeah, the skepticism. But Mintel found something interesting. 64% actually find social media, internet info authentic.
Wait, more trusting than older folks? That's unexpected.
It's a bit of a head scratcher, but yeah, the data's there.
So, digital natives, but not blindly so, huh? This is fascinating to me. It's like this tension. Hyper-connected, but is that always a good thing?
Oh, that's a huge EE theme from the quantum research. Huge. Like this constant connection, it's feeding anxiety for them.
Connected yet anxious. That's way more complex than we hear usually.
Right. Add some nuance to the phone-obsessed image.
Speaking of complex, let's get into their financial goals. Mintel points out big goals, homeownership, cars, travel, and they want it all, like way younger than previous generations.
Ambitious bunch, for sure. But here's the thing. It's not just talk. They're taking action. And this is where Z Business comes in. They highlighted this spend vesting trend.
Spend vesting. Okay, gotta admit, new one on me. Break that down.
So imagine this. Combining investing, like mutual funds, right? Or even digital gold, that's a thing now, with lifestyle spending.
So like, I want that new phone, BUT, also, gotta invest.
Exactly. It's a balancing act.
Is that just savvy financial planning, or is it more like a reaction to how shaky the global economy's been?
Honestly. Probably a bit of both, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a generation that's all about value, value-based purchases, innovative solutions, but affordable ones. They're not just throwing money around, they're being deliberate.
And that deliberateness, it's got to extend to where they shop too, right?
For sure, and that's a huge shift.
TCS survey found like 87% of them already shopping online.
87%, that's massive. What does that say about traditional retail?
Right. It's like they're living in two worlds. Online convenience, but those brick and mortar stores are still there.
It's a balancing act for those businesses, that's for sure.
And speaking of balancing acts, all these financial goals, how's that shaping their careers? You know, what they want to do.
Yeah, is it all hustle culture, side hustles, like we hear so much?
Right. Got to be an entrepreneur, that kind of thing.
Well, the NDTV study, it paints a more, I don't know, nuanced picture.
Oh, really? How so?
So they found 43% willing to sacrifice work-life balance.
Okay, so dedicated, willing to put in the hours for their career.
Totally. BUT, only 9% want to actually be entrepreneurs.
Whoa, that's way lower than I'd have guessed with all the startup hype.
Right. It seems like stability, maybe tied to those anxieties, might be a stronger pull than like the risks of founding a company.
So job security over being the next big CEO. Interesting.
It flips the script a bit, and this is where McKinsey's report is key.
Yeah, what they have to say.
They see huge potential in sectors like manufacturing in India.
Which, those are ripe for growth, we know that.
Exactly. But will Gen Z be the ones to drive it? Big question.
So a potential mismatch there, jobs available versus what they want.
Exactly. And that's the crux, right? IndianGenZ, they've got the tech skills, clearly, from a young age. But those skills need to connect to these evolving industries.
Otherwise, India's kind of missing out on a whole workforce.
Exactly. It's about showing them the relevance, you know?
Like, hey, manufacturing isn't what you think, it's high tech now.
Exactly. Got to make it resonate with their world.
And speaking of their world, let's go back to something earlier. That tradition versus individuality thing, especially in India.
Ah, Yeah, that's a big one. And it's complex.
Because it's not one or the other, right? It's both somehow.
And understanding that, that's crucial, especially for brands.
So what the research say about that?
Well, quantum, they pointed out a key difference. Indian Gen Z versus like their Western counterparts.
Okay, yeah, different cultural context for sure.
Right, so they're digitally connected, globally aware, but they also hold on to those traditional values strong.
Which I imagine that's even stronger outside the big cities, right?
Absolutely. Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, those traditions run deep.
So not rejecting the old ways, but finding how it fits with who they are.
Yeah, it's like, how do I be ME in this specific world?
And is that unique to this generation in India, do you think?
It's definitely heightened for them, I'd say.
I mean, they're coming of age at a unique time, globally connected.
Totally. Exposed to everything, but with those rooted traditions too.
It's a lot to reconcile, and we see it in their choices, maybe.
Oh, for sure. Like maybe not so much in their careers.
Right, that stability thing again, but elsewhere. Hobbies, personal interests, that's where the individuality shines.
Exactly. It's about being authentically themselves within their context.
Which brings us back to, this isn't a one-size-fits-all generation.
No way. No how. And brands need to get that.
Right, what works in Mumbai might not fly in a smaller city.
You got to tailor your message, show you understand their world.
So it's more than just, hey, we know you want travel and nice things.
Way more. You got to connect with the anxieties, the values, and honestly, their concern for the world, that's huge for them.
It's like you said, they've grown up with this awareness, social issues, ethical stuff. It's not just about me, myself, and I.
It's bigger than that, and you see it everywhere in the research. Like Mental, they found this, despite, the challenges of sustainable living being real for them. 8 out of 10 Gen Z consumers deeply concerned about these issues.
Wow, 8 out of 10, that's not a small number.
Not at all. This is core to who they are, their values.
So for brands, it's got to be more than just saying the right things.
Oh, absolutely. You can't just like slap a green label on it.
Right, got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
They'll see through that in a second, this generation. They've grown up with information overload. They can research.
And they're not afraid to call out BS, that's for sure.
Exactly. Holding companies accountable, that's the name of the game.
So authenticity, that's key. But it's almost, I don't know, it's deeper than that, isn't it?
It goes beyond its corporate responsibility, the whole shebang. How are you treating employees? What about your supply chain?
Right, right. Are you actually addressing the stuff they care about?
Those are the questions they're asking, not just what's the product.
It's like, prove to me you're worth my money on multiple levels.
And that, combined with how many of them there are, that's going to reshape things, not just in India, but beyond.
Whoa, okay, going global now, how so?
Think about it, this hyper-connected world, it's their normal. They're not just aware of global issues, they're talking to each other.
Right. It's not just Indian Gen Z, it's a whole generation, globally.
Exactly. Sharing ideas, pushing for change, and India is part of that.
So not just changing how businesses work in India, but India potentially leading the way on ethical stuff globally.
It's not out of the question. And with India's role growing. On the world stage, Gen Z's values, they're part of that conversation.
Man, we've covered a lot of ground here. It's fascinating. Tech, anxieties, financial goals, but also work-life balance, tradition, individuality. It's a lot to unpack.
And that's just it, right? They're complex, but one thing's for sure, Indian Gen Z, they're a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. And I think on that note, we leave everyone with this. Don't underestimate them. They're too tech-savvy, too aware. They care about the world. They've got values. And they're not going away. This is just the beginning, their journey, and it's going to be interesting to watch. So for everyone listening, pay attention. This is going to be big.